Awesome. Thank you. Do we already have our social media friends here? Nope. All right. Hi, Steve. Nice to see
Well,
you too.
good seeing you finally, and you're not
I
on
know.
YouTube. I think I'm
Whew.
finally getting caught up. Good
Good.
stuff. I love this. What if? I really do. I sent you a text, and you gave me a thumbs down because I had a Bible study group, and I said, but I keep giving you thumbs up on YouTube.
Thank you. That's good. All right. I mean, I'm going to give you a thumbs down if you decide to do something more important than this. You know that's going to happen. So,
Something more important. Well, it's good work.
all right. Well, we're here. Hello, Facebook friends. Good to have you guys. Come on over to Zoom if you want. That's where we can actually have conversations. I can't talk to you over Facebook, so join us on Zoom. And we got all 12 of us here, or 13 maybe, because a couple of people are together. So let's go to prayer, and then let's jump in. Thank you, our God. We're really grateful you give us this chance for us just to get together and talk about this cool little library that you've given us. And we we don't want to disrespect it. We want to give it the place of honor that you have given it in our lives. And so help us as we look through this to juggle the thoughts and ideas that are coming out of it, to think wisely, and to trust your spirit to guide us, at least those of us who are Christians. If we're not Christian here, Lord, I pray that we still have great conversation. We'd see something in cool literature that you've given us, this meditation literature to go through, and we'd learn a lot and we enjoy our time together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So here's where we're at. Let's see here. Here's where we're at. These are the 5 things. Let's see. Let's give it a little closer view here. Uh-oh. Come on. There we go. You can see it. Now you can see it, I guess. All right. 5 things. Lexical integrity. It's one of the major things that we want to talk about. Everything that we're doing here, we want to be careful about dictionary definitions. It's going to become really relevant in this particular study that we're doing because we have this weird word, porne, or pornio, right? It's going to come up over and over and over again, and finding out what it means is going to be really hard. We want to be careful not to do what we call the etymological fallacy. We don't simply want to give it its dictionary definition. We want that definition to be determined by its usage because words change over time, right? I say, oh, this is sick. Okay, that does not mean the same thing now that it meant for my parents, okay, or bad or whatever else. Words just change meaning, which is great. So we want to be careful with this. We want to be careful with canonical reading. We want to think very carefully about that. How do individual texts function inside of the entire canon? Texts don't exist on their own. Right? Remember this too. Texts don't mean anything. Texts don't have inherent meaning. They only have meaning inside of structure, inside of our heads, inside of an agreed communal reading of such a thing. So we want to take this text lexically, and then we want to place it inside of, for instance, the book of Song of Songs. We want to understand it there. We want to understand what Song of Songs is doing in the Old Testament, inside of the New Testament, etc. So cultural, canonical reading, cultural distance. We want to figure out what the Near East, the ancient Near East, right, is doing with these things. What's the marriage structure in something 3,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago when all this is written? That's really important because our marriage structure doesn't mean anything. They don't know anything about that, so that's not helpful. Creation theology versus case law. We spent a little bit of time talking about this because we hit Genesis chapter 1 and 2. Right, that God creates man in his image and then splits and does all this stuff. And what's woman supposed to be in relation to all of that? And should we be caring about this creation theology and how it spreads out for all of the Bible? Or do we care about case law? Like, hey, don't do, I'm not even on this thing. Should we care about the cases like different laws, like Leviticus gives you a law? Should you follow a law or should you follow this big meta-narrative, the Heilsgeschichte, this movement, this historical redemptive movement. Which matters more? Okay, we're going to talk about that every week when we're talking about this. And then descriptive versus normative, right? So descriptive, is it just telling us a story? Or is this story supposed to be something that we take for the future? So a very familiar one would be like, Lazarus and the rich man, and they're in hell, and they're talking back and forth to each other. Is this just a cool story? Or are we supposed to understand hell this way? Right? Is this a normative prescription for the way things are? Or is this just descriptive of that? That's one particular example. Or is this just describing something that happened, but it's actually an evil thing? It's just describing it. We're not supposed to do it. So those are the things we started talking about that are going to show up in each one. And then I said this after I said all of that. This is pretty important. There is nothing about sex before marriage mentioned in the Bible. So we're doing this whole thing that says, what does the Bible say about sex before marriage? And the answer is nothing explicitly. The Bible doesn't say a lot explicitly. That's part of the problem of hermeneutics. We think it does. Does the Bible say anything about abortion? Not really. Does the Bible say anything about, there's just so many things that it doesn't say anything about, but that we have moved into our ethical world in a certain way. That might be legitimate to do because of implicit readings. Like we're reading it, we're getting a big picture idea, creation theology, and then we're coming to this decision. Still a perfectly great decision to make. Okay, however you come on that. Historical theology, for instance, in the first few hundred years after the church, pretty much universally, everybody agreed sex before marriage isn't okay. Like we just went list after list after list. All of these different people are saying it's not okay. That's significant. Okay, it's not irrelevant. They're all reading the same text that you're reading. Well, maybe not the same one, because things change. You took that class already with me. Okay, so then we looked at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, which I already talked about just now, and we talked about Deuteronomy 22, specifically the idea of whether like a case law is moral or ceremonial or civil, right? Those are the things that we talked about. And this tripartite law, and it's split into three things. And the only ones that we as New Testament Christians have to care about is the moral law. And I said, that's just made up nonsense. Okay, these are just things that people say because it helps them to organize things. It might be true, but the Bible certainly doesn't set it like that. It doesn't say, hey, here's the ceremonial, here's the civil. Those are the ones that are wiped out, but the moral ones are kept. And even if it did, it doesn't define which the moral ones are. Right? So I've had a lot of conversations even this week with people at my church, well, I guess it was last week, Wednesday, that just talking about the law. Like, you don't have to follow the 10 Commandments. Okay, I say this all the time. It shouldn't be new to anybody. You do not have to follow the 10 Commandments. Stop following the 10 Commandments. Okay, you're like, well, you have to follow the moral ones. All right, which ones are moral? Which ones are civil? Which ones are ceremonial? And in order to define that, you have to just make stuff up, right? So nobody follows the Sabbath commandment. Nobody, none of you try. You give up trying. Maybe you never tried. Or you tried your version of it, but you didn't try their version of it. By the way, theirs is on Saturday. So if you want to follow their version of it, you have to do it on Saturday, 0 work, period. None of you even make an attempt to try to do that. So why do you pretend that you keep the 10 Commandments? Right? So, but we are supposed to follow God's law. So we just have to figure out what that means for laws to work and how they move into the New Testament. And after they get into the New Testament, how do they move into our life? So we talked about this with homosexuality. The Bible might say something about homosexuality because it makes a good bumper sticker. Exactly. Right? The Bible might say something, but it doesn't say anything explicitly the way we want. So we move it. We shift it. Right? And this is just what people do. All right. And then we're going to jump into Exodus chapter 22. That's where we're at now. We're going to do Exodus 22. We're going to do probably the most significant passage in Leviticus, which actually doesn't say anything about what we need to talk about, but that everybody always goes back to as one of the main things. Even the New Testament authors seem to go back there. Not very clear. And then we're going to talk about Song of Songs. That's my goal today, to get through Song of Songs, because anytime I teach on Song of Songs, it takes about 6 weeks because everybody's just so fascinated with the book. They just want to go all over the place and play. So maybe we should just do the book one day. Just like walk through the whole book because it's so much fun in Hebrew. Woo-hoo. All right, but first, we're going to go to Exodus chapter 22. So this is just two little verses, 22, 16 through 17. I have 3 lines written on my piece of paper. That's it. There's not a lot that I'm going to tell you about this, but you might have something to say. All right. In fact, the things I have to tell you are so very obvious. I'm just repeating. There's nothing that we want to say here, but there's something here. So anybody want to read Exodus 22, 16 through 17? All right. Anybody not want to read it but willing to read it anyway?
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Thank you.
If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins.
All right. So does this speak into our particular situation? I mean, keeping in mind that I picked all of these verses because they might have something to do with it. So, I mean, you can't say, no, it has nothing to do with it whatsoever. I mean, I did choose them because scholars think they do have something to do with it. What do you see here?
Can't skip steps.
Okay, you can't skip steps. That's an interesting way of putting that. All right, that is, you can't jump from single to sex without marriage inside there, in between, right?
Well, I suspect a lot of people cheat on that one.
But you're saying this text says not to do that, not to cheat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Better not.
Seems to be a pay to play.
Pay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's good, especially this one, because, right, what's the solution to the problem? Bride price, right? I mean, it's a payment thing. There's a payment situation. So very good. Yep. Pay to play. All right. So we've got a man. He's seducing a virgin, right? A young woman. Okay. We're assuming this is somebody who has not been with a man. That's the idea there. Or entices or persuades, seduces, that word. And she's not pledged to be married. And he sleeps with her. Then he has to do 2 things, right? He has to pay, as Amy just said, and he has to marry her, right? Pay the bride price. Well, I mean, that is what it is. By paying the bride price, she becomes his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he still must pay the bride price for virgins. Okay, so he has to pay for this. So what is this text trying to do?
Places high value on sex.
Okay, places high value on sex. Yeah.
I would say protect the value of the father who owns the daughter so that he's not out of a lot of money.
Interesting. You see those 2 different ways of looking at it. I think both of them are correct, but it's just a different way of seeing this, right? One is virginity matters, right? That's sexism. Sex is vital. One is, protect this man, protect the dad. He's got to get money out of this because, his little girl's going to be used in this way. He's got to get something out of it. So it protects the family.
Also protects the woman.
Right. Yep. Because there'll be a lot less men just falling prey to their lusts. Right? They have to think first.
Like, if you're gonna do it, you can't use her and discard her. Like, now you got to. At a minimum, you got to pay the dad. Dad's probably gonna let you marry her. If not, then dad thinks he can marry her to somebody else, so she's protected by dad. Or if dad doesn't think he can marry her to somebody else, he's gonna make you marry her.
Yep.
Actually, how would he marry her off if, how does that work? If she's not a virgin, she can't be.
At a cheaper price.
Yeah, you could still be married as a virgin, as a non-virgin. But you're right. Most people in that culture would not prefer that. Yep. And yeah, you wouldn't get as much money for it, probably.
Blue light special.
Yeah, because they talk a great deal about what restitution is required for having sex in Leviticus, I think it is. Or maybe
Yeah, we're
it's
getting to that.
in Exodus. You know, I know they talk about bestiality here and you know, oxen and whatnot. But
Yep.
so he gets paid twice, the dad does.
Well, yes, if he refuses to give his
Right.
daughter away, he's going to get the bride price for both of them for the
Right.
same twice. Yeah, you're right. That's what it looks like.
And that's
So
how
what
I'm
is this?
interpreting it. I might not be right, but
No, I think you're right. So what does this say about sex outside of marriage? Does it give us any hints as to how they would have understood it then?
yeah, it costs money.
So as long as you pay for it, it's okay. Now we're really going crazy here. All right, you can pay for sex before marriage, but you can't.
I'm sorry to be back.
That's called the red light special.
That's right. That's why it's the red light special. Very nice. Yep. All right. I mean, virginity seems to matter here, though, right?
It says there's a cost, is another way to put it. So, like, you
Yep.
know, a lot of times people think that sex before marriage doesn't have a cost in our society. So,
Yep. That's right. For at least for them in their culture, it had a cost, which says it was important to them.
I think it could also be a big financial drain on a guy if he takes the virginity of a girl and isn't given her as a wife. Not everyone can afford multiple bride prices, so his action could seriously hinder his future livelihood.
Mhm.
Once again, giving value to that action.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar. It's putting into the law books what dads do is they're cleaning their shotgun, right? Like, hey, there's going to be a price. If she comes back and she's not the way she left, you're going to pay. You're not going to give me $1,000, but I'm definitely going to shoot off certain parts of your body, so whatever. Yep.
Well, technically, it's not saying that sex before marriage comes with a price because either way, if he wants sex, he's going to have to pay for it, whether it's having sex with her and then having to pay for it and maybe not getting her as a wife or marrying her and paying for it and having sex. So I'm not trying to argue against sex. I'm not trying to argue for sex before marriage, but that kind of, it's not really said here that sex before marriage is wrong. It's just that the father has the option to take the money and not give the daughter.
Yes,
I mean,
fair enough. It's not explicitly said sex before marriage is wrong, but if you do it, you're getting married.
when that's like the implication is almost like there's no such thing as sex before marriage. If you have the sex, now you're getting married.
Yep. Yep.
There's no such thing as sex before marriage. Unless dad says no.
Sure, there
But
is. There's
pre-marriage.
there's prostitution. I mean, this is a thing. So there is such thing.
Yep. But in this case, yeah, they're going to end up getting married. All right, so that's Exodus. Okay, what you got to do is somehow keep all of these in your head, right? Okay, we got Genesis, we got Leviticus. No, we don't have Leviticus yet. We got Genesis, we got Deuteronomy. Now we got Exodus. Now we're about to jump into Leviticus. Okay, this is the text. This is the passages that nobody ever wants to read. If you're doing the Bible in a year, you are skipping Leviticus because, oh my goodness, right? And certainly the first several chapters of Numbers. All right, so let's look up verses 24 and 25 in here. And we're going to get to what it says, but I just want to take you on a journey. So open it up to chapter 18 and just keep that whole thing open there in front of you. We're heading for 24 and 25, right? Don't make yourself unclean, blah, 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 or whatever it says there. But let's start at the very beginning. Just read a couple of verses, right? So somebody give me the intro, just verses 1 through, 4, before it starts listing everything.
I got you. Leviticus 18. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt, where you lived, and you shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing you. You shall not follow their statutes. My ordinances you shall observe, and my statutes you shall keep following them. I am the Lord your God.
All right. Summarize in a sentence or two.
God's in charge.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's a good application, I think. I don't know. It doesn't say God's in charge, but yes. Tell me what it actually says.
The rules.
He
Don't
makes the
do
rules.
like the bad people. Do like what God wants you.
Okay. Don't do what the bad people do. That is the pagans, right? The Gentiles, those kinds of people, those whatever they are. Do the right thing. Do what God wants you to do. Okay. So get ready for this. It's coming. Not the Egyptians. Don't be like them. Don't be like the Canaanites, etc. So Leviticus 18, or Leviticus in general. Well, what is the book of Leviticus about?
Law.
It's about law.
It's about law. Okay. Go a little further here.
It's about well, it's the chiasm. It's a chiasm. It's a large chiasm, and it culminates in the atonement. So
Okay. Yeah. Good. So what is it about?
About making yourself right in relationship with God.
cleanliness. Yes, that's exactly right. Riston was right.
Good. Okay. Making yourself right, righteous, cleanliness. Another word might be holiness. Oh, I just put my two fingers up, one back. All right. So yeah, this is the holiness book, right? I mean, Leviticus. It's the book for the Levites. It's for the class of priests. These are the things that the priests are supposed to do. Okay. And this is a book that the priests are putting out so that people understand what does it mean for us to get in contact with God? How do we approach God? Here are the rules in order to approach God. Okay. Certain things happen. They get you dirty. You have to get clean certain ways. Doesn't mean you're sinful necessarily. Some of it does. Some of it doesn't. You just got to read the text. Right? There's going to be different levels of how close you can get to God. Certain people can only get so close. So more closer, depending on what you do. That's all that's going on here. So this particular area of Leviticus is what we call the Holiness Code. So it's this deeper, this more specific set. Okay, so chapter 18, 17 through 26 is what we call the Holiness Code. Okay, chapter 18 is all about sexual distinctives. Okay, so yeah, obviously this is going to be one of the ones that we want to talk about, sexual distinctives. So if you look at, as soon as you get done with verse 4 or 5, you look at like verses 6 through 18. I need to look at it myself. But you'll see a phrase that's repeated over and over in here. Anybody see that? Leviticus 18, 6 and following.
I am Yahweh.
I don't think that's in there.
You shall not.
Okay, but what shall you not do?
Sexual relations.
What are all of your saying? It says sexual relations.
Uncover.
Uncover what?
The nakedness.
Yeah, uncover your nakedness. It's going to show up over and over again. Do not uncover your nakedness. That's going to be it. Okay, so verses 6 through 18 are don't uncover your nakedness. No, so with people who are related to you. Right? So it's incest things that are going on there. Okay. Verse 19, you'll notice, is all about don't do it when she's menstruating. Okay. Verse 20, definitely don't do it with somebody else's wife. So it's adultery. Verse 21, don't offer them up. Don't molech them. By the way, there's probably no God named Molech. I know your Bible translates it that way. That's okay. They can do whatever they want. But moleching is probably something you do by sacrificing to a god. You offer up your child. Whatever. Don't do that. No sacrificing your children. And then no male same-sex intercourse in verse 22. And then, of course, no animals in verse 23. Okay, so we've got this list of things, tons of different sexual things that are going on here. And then we get to verses 24 and 25. So read that. Whoever was just reading it can keep going unless somebody else grabs it. That was Riston, I think.
Verse 24, do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, for by all these practices the nations I am casting out before you have defiled themselves. Thus the land became defiled, and I punished it for its iniquity, but the land vomited out its inhabitants.
All right, so don't defile yourselves in all the ways that we've just listed, because the land is sacred, and I'm going to vomit you out. The land's going to even vomit you out all over the place. It says that the land will throw you up, okay? Because the land is supposed to be sacred, and you're making it unsacred by doing all of these things, or you're making it common. It's not supposed to be common. It's holy. It's where God lives. Okay. Now, again, just want to make this really emphasis that I had right here. It doesn't say don't have sex before marriage. There's nothing here that speaks about that specifically. So the debate on this passage is going to be, does it refer implicitly? Do any of these categories, could they be used to incorporate it in? What's going on in the big picture here? Is this an exhaustive list of things that you can't do? Or is this just a whole group of things that everybody else would know the other things that go in here too? Right? Like they would just like, yeah, we know that you don't. I mean, we get the big picture here, right? Don't do all of these sexual things with your body that you're not supposed to do. We get it. Okay, so Leviticus 18 is about defining the scope of sexual morality. Okay, now here's the debate. Here, I mean, I just said what the debate was, but here's like you've got like Jacob Milgrom. If you've ever read the Yale series, what's it called? The Anchor Bible commentary series, Anchor series. Jacob Milgrom, just fantastic scholar. He's going to go through here and he's going to say the prohibitions in this text are all about preserving family structure. It's all about that. That's the organizing principle of this whole thing, that the family is somehow preserved correctly. Okay. The word uncover your nakedness that Riston just talked about is translated exactly what Amy said, right? Sexual relations, right? Sexual immorality. Don't do that. Don't have sexual relations with that. And what he's going to say is that this list is not meant to be comprehensive. It's meant to be logical. Like, here are some things to fit into this. And he's going to say, Israelite law does not assume, this is his quote, does not assume sexual access to unmarried women as morally neutral. Virginity is socially and legally protected. And he's going to use, as his argument, Deuteronomy 22 and Exodus 22, which are the two that we just looked at, which didn't exactly say that, but maybe could be understood that way as you start bringing them together. Okay, so it's almost like I could poke holes in every text. So I have got a lot of buckets here, and I'm poking holes in this one. I poke holes in this one. I poke holes in this one. And when you take all of those together and you put them together, the water holds a whole lot better, right? Even if there's a hole in each one of them and they're different places, the water is going to hold more and more and more the more buckets that you get there. It will still leak out. That's the concept. Right? Like it gets stronger if you just see the big picture of all of this stuff together. So that's what Milgrom is trying to argue for. He's going to say Leviticus 18 is part of a broader sexual ethic that assumes chastity before marriage. Okay, so that's the, traditional view. Do not have sex before marriage. That's what Milgrom is going to say that this text is actually trying to get to. Although he'll admit it doesn't say it explicitly, that's one of the things that would be included under this immorality section. Okay, now, other scholars, more critical scholars, more biblical, looking at this is Leviticus, this is the holiness code, and it comes at a certain time after the J and the E sources, right, that are looking at all the source criticism and form criticism stuff. They're going to come in and they're going to say, no, Leviticus 18 is specific. It's not comprehensive. Yes, for sure. It's very specific. They're going to agree with that, but they're going to say the point is that it's specific. It's listing all of these taboo relationships. Okay. And it's trying to give you a somewhat comprehensive list. Okay. If consensual premarital sex were morally equivalent to incest or adultery, it would be listed. That's what they're saying. If this is the same thing as just taking somebody's wife or having sex with an animal, then it would just be one of the other verses. Also, don't do it before marriage. And it's not there. So we can't use this chapter. This is what the biblical scholars would say, the critical scholars would say. Okay, so uncover the nakedness of ervat lo tagala. doesn't specifically say that anywhere. It's focusing on kinship boundaries, not marital status. Okay, so you have the two different ideas, what they're both trying to say here. So what does this have to do with that big word? Remember the word that I introduced you guys to before? Let's see, porne. Okay, which you guys know, right? Just take that off, as you know, that's where that word comes from. Porne. What does this have to do with it? All right, so Craig Keener, who's another phenomenal scholar, I've known him for years. He teaches at Asbury. He says that in Second Temple Judaism, Leviticus 18, the passage we're talking about right now, became a foundational sexual code. So Leviticus 18, just to give you some critical thoughts, Leviticus 18 is a priestly text, so it's going to come from the P source, right? And the P source is going to be, let's see, probably if you're conservative and you believe in this, you're going to say probably 5th century. Okay, so the 400s BC. Okay. The Second Temple, when we talk about Second Temple interpretation, I know I use these words and not everybody understands them immediately. Second Temple means something like, I don't know, 200 to 100. That is, so this is AD, and this is BC. And, just like generations, it's not a specific thing. So, 300, it's a few hundred years before to probably the end of the temple, 70 AD. Okay, that time period when people are writing. So like the book of Daniel probably fits into the Second Temple period. It's probably the only Old Testament book that we have that's truly Second Temple. Okay, maybe there are a few other passages, but that's probably in the 200s or something like that. So by the time we get to the Second Temple, from the 5th century, the 400s, to the 200s, this had become a foundational sexual code. This is how people would have understood what they're supposed to do as good Israelites. So then he's going to take a step further. He's going to go into this Second Temple period. Tell me some Second Temple books that you know of, just to make sure we understand what Second Temple is. Just name one Second Temple text that you've ever read before. Or
Maccabees.
Maccabees. Okay, good.
Matthew.
Probably. What?
Matthew.
Matthew. Good job. Any others?
Mark.
Mark. Keep going.
Luke.
Right. All right. You get the idea? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Blah, 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 blah. The whole New Testament is Second Temple texts. Okay, so they're all going to flow under this. So we get to a particular one that we think Luke wrote, and it's Acts 15. Now, we're going to deal with this when we get to it in the New Testament, but we have to deal with it now just for a second. Okay, because Acts 15 is going to come along, and scholars are going to say that this particular text is going to be bouncing back to Leviticus 18. So as they're looking at this text, you guys know what happens in Acts 15. Acts 15 is what they call the Jerusalem Council. So it's where they're trying to figure out what do they do with the Gentiles, because Gentiles are getting saved and they can't deny it anymore. They're like coming in, the Holy Spirit's doing crazy stuff with these people. But they're like, yeah, but we can't just make them Jews. Like, they got to follow the law, right? We got to get them circumcised. They got to keep the kosher laws. They got to do all the stuff that makes them good. You can't just come in, right? You have to do the stuff. And so they have this list of rules. And there are 3 rules that are going to be listed in Acts 15. Let's just look at it real quick. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts 15. And you will see verse 19. Okay, so everybody's listening to Barnabas and Paul. They're coming, they're quoting the prophets and stuff like that. And then it says there, therefore I've reached the decision that we should not trouble those Gentiles who are turning to God, but we should write to them about abstaining from things polluted by idols and from sexual immorality and from whatever has been strangled and from blood. All right, so it's depending on how you read the text, it's 3 or 4 different things. I think it's 3 different things that are going on here. The one that matters to us is that middle one, right? Refrain from sexual immorality. That's this word. Refrain from that. And scholars are saying what they mean when they're looking at this is this sexual code in their mind. Leviticus 18. Saying, this is what we're expecting of you. Now, Acts 15 is fraught with all kinds of problems. Okay? Number one, that they voted to decide what it is that got you into the kingdom in their world, right? They just took a vote. Some people agreed, some people did. It's a compromise document is what it is. And then, of course, the bigger problem is that while Paul thinks this is the right answer right now, by the time you get to some of the letters that are written, he completely changes his mind. It's like, no, we don't have to. They can eat stuff sacrificed to idols. Like, all right, so we don't need to hold to Acts 15. I hope you don't, because not even Paul does in the same generation, right? He's already thinking differently. But anyway, that's what's happening here. Okay, Acts 15 is referring to all those things, and scholars argue that the prohibitions in Acts 15 are reflecting Leviticus 18. So now, following this logic here, now we have to ask the question, well, what the heck does this mean then? Because if this is this, which, by the way, not used here, okay, no word sexual immorality, porne, in the Septuagint here, but it is used constantly in chapter 17 and 19. Okay, it just happens not to mention in 18 in the areas that we're looking at here. So when you get to 17 and 19, though, you're going to see this great long list of the word porne. All right, so back to Craig Keener for a second. Keener's arguing that Jewish audiences, when they hear the word porneia, they're going to think about Leviticus 18, and they're going to think about whatever that means. So what is it that it actually means? And this is crucial. Remember, Leviticus 18 doesn't say nothing about our actual problem here. And porne doesn't show up here. But if we look at 17:7, if we look at 19:29, if we look at 20 verse 5, you're going to see over and over again this word. Now, it's going to show up hundreds of times in the Bible. It's not one of those words that we don't know what it means. However, trying to figure out what fits into this is the whole ballgame here. Okay, so I can tell you in a second what porne means. It means sexual immorality. It means things that you do that are wrong in sex. But that's not helpful unless you get to find what the list of things that are wrong are. Okay, so sexual immorality for sure probably includes adultery, although there's a different word for that. Okay, it's a different word, but it's probably still subsumed under this larger word for porne. Okay, so there are some scholars that are going to say every time in the Old Testament when you see this word porne, you are supposed to think of one thing. That's what it always means. And they've gone to some great lengths to list every reference that is in there and how it can refer to this. I'll leave that to you because we're not going to look at hundreds of different texts, right? But what they will say it refers to is cult prostitution. Cult prostitution, not just prostitution, but cult prostitution. And they would say over time, people began to think of this word a little bit differently, maybe just as prostitution. And then as time continues, maybe just, whatever is wrong to begin with in sex. Like it broadens from cult prostitution to more. Now, this is, if it does this, we should be able to see it happening. And this is too much. We can't do that here to be able to look at all these different texts. But let me just read a few of them to you in Leviticus 17 and 19. So 17:7, you can see it yourself, but I'll just look at it. So they shall no more sacrifice their sacrifices to goat demons, after whom they whore. This shall be a statute forever for them throughout their generations. Okay, so it translates that word whore, that's porne. Okay, so that is prostitute. Okay, and they would say, no, cult prostitute is probably better. And keep in mind what cult prostitution is, right? It's not merely a sexual act, just as rape is not merely a sexual act, right? Cult prostitution is their way of being idolatrous, right? It's doing something very different. Okay, so that's Leviticus 17. Look at Leviticus 19, verse 29. Do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and the land become full of depravity. Cult prostitute, or at least prostitute. Okay, because we've got mention, or they're all around here for omens, fortune tellers, mediums, necromancers, etc. All in that context. You get to chapter 20, verse 5. Then I will set my face against that man and against his clan, and will cut them off from among their people, him and all who follow him, whoring after Molech, or prostituting by way of sacrifice. Okay, so whoring after. So again, idolatry, prostitution. So it's idol worship, or other kinds of worship other than God. Verse 6, if a person turns to mediums and necromancers whoring after him, again, porne, I will set my face against that person, and I will cut them off from among his people. Verse 7, they shall not marry a prostitute or a woman who's been defiled, neither shall they marry a woman divorced from her husband, for the priest is holy to his God. So they shall not marry a prostitute. Leviticus 21:9, and the daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by whoring, right, profanes her father, she shall be burned with fire. Again, likely cult prostitution. A widow, verse 14, a widow or a divorced woman, or a woman who has been defiled, or a prostitute, these she shall not marry, but he shall take as a wife, as his wife, a virgin of his own people. So, like, you see how all of these are prostitute, or at least prostitute, if not cult prostitute, which is the main prostitution that's going on, right? Temple prostitutes. So the traditional reading, okay, if you're trying to say no sex before marriage, is going to take Leviticus 18, sexual boundaries, Deuteronomy 22 and Exodus 22 with the virginity laws, right? Genesis 2 with the creation theology, and put all of this together and say, even though it doesn't say it in any of these places, all these buckets put together, it's going to say no sex before marriage.
Can you clarify on the prostitution? Because I've heard this two different ways, and it might have even been from you. But is it literally prostitution or prostituting yourself out to other gods?
So that's the difference between prostitution and cult prostitution.
Okay.
Okay, so there are scholars who would say all of these passages have to do with prostituting yourself out to other gods. It's still prostitution, right? You're still being paid, or probably being paid in the temple to have sex as part of that worship of God, of the gods. Okay, so now we just have to determine, what does this word porne mean? Does it always mean cult prostitution? Does it change to just mean prostitution at some point? What's happening?
So could it be two levels? Starting with the being close to God, but making mistakes as people do, and then go into the prostitution level. It's a lifestyle away from God. So they've squeezed God out of the picture.
Yeah. So they're all forms of prostitution, regardless of whether they're cult prostitution, kind of are cult prostitution. They're kind of, you're squeezing God out of the picture. You're doing what you want, worshiping bodies, worshiping sexuality, worshiping lust, etc., and moving God out. For sure, that's a good application. It moves in that direction. Whether the word actually means that or not is going to be a question. But I think if I were preaching that, I would definitely go in that direction, Tom. Preaching is a different thing than exegesis, right? Hopefully it starts in exegesis. But that's not usually what I'm spending most of my time preaching on. I'm trying to get to the point of preaching, which is Jesus is king. That's always my goal. All right, so here's what we have to ask. Back to our hermeneutical stuff, right? Is Leviticus 18 a list of egregiously sexual sins, or is it a complete map of sexual ethics? Is it exhaustive, or is it just general? Just trying to give you an idea of some of the things that you should stay away from. And while we all wish, especially if we did True Love Waits or whatever, we all wish that it just told us real straight out. It didn't. They just didn't tell us about that. But they didn't tell us about a lot of things, right? All the questions that you had when you were 17, actually, that go up all the way up until you're married, probably, if you're a Christian, right? Okay, I can hold hands. That's okay. Okay, I can kiss. That's okay. I can't use tongue. All right. Okay. What's next? I can use tongue, but I can't do oral. Whatever. Like all those questions. What can I get away with? Well, they don't answer that stuff for you. So I think I would say that most scholars that I read would say it's representative, but not exhaustive. It's not meant to list every single one, which would leave it open for other sexual sins.
So, I mean, I definitely think that it's representative because there are probably plenty of other bad sexual sins that aren't listed here. But if it was easy enough just to say, only have sex with your wife, and then maybe
That
you
seems like
find that this person can't be your wife, but just have sex with your wife and nobody else. Leviticus would be a really short book.
Yes. It's a really good point, which is probably one of the larger arguments for this is a lot more complicated. That the people in that time did not consider sex the way we do. Just have sex only with your wife. Right? There do seem to be some outs there. Like, well, I could also make another wife, right? I can have a concubine. Is that okay? And yeah, I mean, men don't get in a lot of trouble for their sexual proclivities.
So is the text saying it's the cult prostitution that's the problem, not regular prostitution? Is that what you're
That,
saying?
that's the
Because
question.
then, like, what then? If so, then like, what about like there's looking some stuff up now about the difference between prostitution and cult prostitution. Like, there's recent scholarship that widespread cult prostitution probably wasn't as widespread as we like to think that it was. That was maybe some bad readings. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, or if this is just nonsense I found on Google. But like they talk about a biblical scholar by the name of Nisanin, Marty Nisanin, and saying that like a lot of the stuff is more exaggerated, possibly, and that where we say prostitute, it might just be like a consecrated holy person in the temple, like a temple servant, but not a temple prostitute, and it was mistranslated.
I don't know about that. No, so that's very interesting. I don't know the scholar that you're mentioning. I'd want to look him up and find out more. Yeah.
And my question earlier about prostitution versus cult prostitution, I think I was thinking of it more as a like a metaphor of selling out to other gods, like not physically sex in honor of other gods, but it is literally the act of sex.
Well, that's how it's understood. Sexual immorality, yes. That something is happening. Now, Travis is suggesting something that maybe it's not quite what we think it is. I'd have to read all of that scholarly literature before I have anything to say about that. But yes, so the temple, at least as I understand the past, which might be changed here in the near future, like there was actual sexual things taking place in the temple. That was part of their worship. So they would actually, because the gods get aroused, right? And you want to arouse the gods. You want them to do certain things. This is how mythology works, right? So like you might cut yourself and let the blood come. You might masturbate. You might do different things to get the gods to do what it is that you want them to do. So you manipulate the gods into frenzies, or maybe even to come down or to do things like that. So yeah, it's actual practices. And remember, Jephthah is heralded as one of those great ones because he stabs a woman and a man through with a spear while they're in the act of temple prostitution. Right? At least that's how it's understood. And he's a hero of the faith. So you're not allowed to do that kind of stuff. Okay. So we have a little bit more information, but I don't know that all of us, at least I haven't, I've made a decision. This is how we're supposed to understand it. All we're doing is muddying the waters a little bit. Okay, which is fine when we leave. That might be exactly what's happened. But even if all we do is muddy the waters, you're not going to be so quick to agree with one side or the other in the future, right? Even that is a great thing. Okay, I might not have enough information. I thought I had a lot of information, and Travis just brought up a new scholar talking about temple prostitution might not even be prostitutes. Now I'm okay, I've got a lot more to learn on it. Maybe can't wait to figure out who this guy is. So please text me his name so I can at least look up whether he went to, I don't know, Pensacola,
He's an
Iowa.
Old Testament professor at the university in Helsinki in Finland.
Okay, well, that does tell me that's where he teaches. Where did he do his degree? Do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
There's probably not the time for it. You can just tell me later.
Yeah.
Or just give me the spelling of his name, because whatever you said, Nisisism, I don't know what you said. But we'll go on while you're looking that up. All right. Song of Songs. And this is perfect. We've got 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, and then we're just going to shut it down. Song of Songs, wherever we're at, we're just going to shut it down. And obviously, we're not going to walk through all the Song of Songs. It's a long thing. I just wanted to show you a few verses to give you a big picture, because this is, God's sex book, right? This is the book. This is, sanctified porn, might be. Marty Nissinen. Okay. I'm looking forward to finding out more about him. All right. So the question is that we have in front of us is, does Song of Songs portray sexual intimacy before marriage or not? Okay. Does it show that sexual intimacy before marriage might, does that open the Bible's view of sex? Could we see Song of Songs as an argument for, hey, it's okay? Because here it is. It looks like they're fooling around in Song of Songs. So I took 6 verses that I wanted to look at. You could probably find 100 more. Well, there's not that many verses. Whatever. So I want to look at the first few verses, chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 of Song of Songs. But you got to find Song of Songs first. Let's see here. What's the order? Job, Psalms, Proverbs.
Just before Isaiah.
Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Songs. Okay. I forgot Ecclesiastes in there. That was my problem. All right. Chapter 1. Anybody want to read those first few verses? You have to have no shame if you read them. Okay. Get to be some sensual text here.
I got you. Verse 2. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is perfume poured out. Therefore the maidens love you. Draw me after you. Let us make haste. The king has brought me into his chambers. We will exult and rejoice in you. We will extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you.
Okay, married or unmarried?
Sort of.
Okay, Tom, did you say sort of?
Yeah, he's the king.
Okay, so apparently you can be kind of married in this particular section. Kind of. Sort of married. All right?
If the king said it, it's okay.
Okay. All right. So anything the king says is okay. Whew. I'm sure David would appreciate that. Of course, Nathan says, but whatever. All right. So you think there's sex going on here?
At least foreplay.
Okay. Yep. I mean, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. All right. So I mean, we got at least some making out going on, right? It's kisses plural, so that's the definition of making out, as far as I see. Your love is better than wine. I mean, we got some. Yeah, your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is perfume poured out. The maidens love you, so everybody thinks you're hot. Everybody's, like you just walk by and everyone smells you and they want you. Draw me after you. Let's make
There's a
haste.
lot of changing between second person and third person. Let him kiss me, for
Yep.
your love is more delightful. Let the king bring me into his chamber. So who's doing what?
So this is a great question that I wasn't going to deal with, but now I have to. Okay, so
My bad.
some of your versions might separate it. Like you might have little italics in the columns that say beloved or lover or something like that. Any of yours have that in there?
It does, but that was all within one section that was labeled she.
Right. So remember, those things are all made up, right? So, I mean, this is just somebody's interpretation of when it would be. And depending on what version you have, it's going to put beloved and lover at different places. And depending on what version you have, you're going to say either 2 people or 3 people in this. Okay, that some people would argue this book is a love triangle going on. Okay, that there's a king, there's a shepherd boy, and then there's the woman. Okay, which makes for a great Hallmark story, I'm sure. Okay, there's, all kinds of stuff going on. And then, of course, you have singers that are in there because this is some sort, you can see it's a poem, right? So it's a song. They're singing. So the woman will sing, then the man will sing, and then there'll be the choir will come in. And then, so this is all like a play being done here, probably. Okay, now, remember that this text might not look like this in its original setting. Okay, the setting that we have now is what we call the canonical setting, right? The canonical context here. That was our number 2 on our list of things hermeneutically that we need to care about. So Song of Songs, we need to ask, what in the world is it doing in the canon? And why is it in this particular shape? Okay, and it definitely has a shape. So it has this structure of lover and beloved, whatever that looks like, the woman, the man, or the 3, right? But it also has what might be called chiasm here. That is, there's a rising action up until chapter 3 and then a falling action. There's some sort of so anytime you see a chiasm, it's, like chapter, we'll just say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, something like this. Okay, and chapter 3 is your main point, maybe. Chapter 2 and chapter 4 are the same, and chapter 1 and chapter 5 might be the same. Okay, so they're echoing each other. So a lot of people see chapter 3 as your main thing here. That's important to all of this too. Okay, we can't exegete all of this. We just have to look at it and see what we see right now. Unless we go into it later in the future. But so your question is good, Amy, and I don't know how to answer it right now. Who is talking in which place? First person, second person, third person? Like what's going on? Okay, we don't know. We definitely have a king in here, although we don't know if the king is the main person or she's just calling him her king, right? So there's a lot. I know it says the king has brought me into his chambers, but we're going to struggle with that a little bit later. That's what that third person in there is, the shepherd boy possibility here. So that's why it's because it says the king and because it's in this particular form that people say Solomon. They call it Song of Solomon. Most people just call it Song of Songs. We don't want to assume Solomon's in this in any way. And I know it says, I think the first verse says the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Okay, but that's just giving him overarching credit for this, just like it's the Psalms of David but David wrote less than half of them, probably. So it's just, Ecclesiastes is supposed to be from Solomon, but really it's Kohelet, whatever that means, the teacher. So we've just gotten in traditions. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are said to be by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but they don't claim those things of themselves. Stuff like that. Be careful with authorship is all I'm trying to say. But let's assume that they're kissing, that whoever this is, your name is this, your name is that, everybody loves you. And then he brought me into his chambers, right? And then we will exalt. So maybe that's the singers in this thing. Like everybody's rejoicing about this. We'll extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you. All right. So we've got something happening here, as Tom calls sorta, right? So they're sort of into each other. Somebody is. Choir. Now let's go a little bit further, because now she's going to talk in verse 5, right? She's going to talk about herself, what she looks like, etc. And look at verse 12 and 13, just the next section out there. Anybody want to read that?
I think this needs a woman's voice.
Thank you. Do it.
And how far am I going with this one?
Just, I don't know, just a few verses is fine. Maybe 13, 14.
Okay. While the king was at his table, my perfume spread its fragrance. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh, resting between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms from the vineyards of En-Gedi.
Okay. All right. So we don't have to exegete all this. Is he on a table? Is he laying on a table? Is he laying on a couch? The point is that he's laying down in some way. He's reclining, and he's reclining where? In henna, like a cluster of henna blossoms. We don't know where, right? But I think verse 16 and 17 will say, yeah, our couch, whatever that word for couch is there, our table is green. The beams of our house are cedar. Our rafters are pine. They're out in the woods, right? So they're enjoying making out under the pine trees. And I mean, it seems pretty significant. My beloved is to me a bag of myrrh that lies between my breasts. Okay, now these are all just imagery. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean he's between her breasts. It's a bag of myrrh that is, which is sweet smelling and all that. But I mean, this is highly erotic. You're supposed to get turned on when you're reading this. Okay, if you're not getting turned on, it's because it's ancient Near Eastern love poetry and it doesn't work for you today, right? Like her hair is like goat's hair. You're like, yeah, that doesn't turn me on at all, right? Like, but for them, it's like, yeah, baby. Okay, so they're enjoying all of this. By the time we get to verse 6 of chapter 2, it feels like we've definitely gone a little bit further. Anybody got that one? Or actually, do the number 5. 5 and 6. Anybody want to read that? 5 and 6. All right. I will read it. Okay, go ahead. Whoever said it, I got it.
Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me.
Okay, which is just great language to keep it very nice and pure here. His left arm's under her head, his right arm is embraced, like to giving her a hug, embracing her. Yeah, I mean, the word is like he fondles her, right? So yeah, I mean, they're in this. Okay, it doesn't say they're having sex, but they're doing all the things that you get to do before you get to sex. Maybe, I don't know, sexual activity at least. However we want to talk about that. And right, this aphrodisiac, sustain me with raisins and apples, I'm faint with love, right? I mean, the whole idea is it's getting turned on. Now, just a real quick jump in here, look at verses 6 and 7, because this is going to be a constant refrain. I'm heading in one direction. I want to just pivot for just a second in verse 6 and 7, right? Or sorry, 7. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the wild does, do not stir up or waken love until it is ready. Okay, which seems to have some sort of a whoa, whoa, whoa. right? However you want to understand, there's some kind of, be careful with this. Don't go too far into this. Not necessarily too far sexually, but don't, if love's not there, you get there slower, maybe. All right, so we've got making out going on. We've got we've got in between our breasts. We've got left arm is left or right hand is fondling, whatever our hand, I don't know. And then chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. Anybody want to read that one?
I will continue. Chapter
All right,
3,
thanks.
verse 1. Upon my bed at night I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. I will rise now and go about the city, in the streets, and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The sentinels found me as they went about the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I passed them, when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber that her conceived me.
Okay. So, sex or no sex? Marriage or no marriage? What's happening here? Especially that last verse.
In the very bed I was conceived.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it seems like she's trying to make a point in a poetic way, right? At this point, they're definitely doing it, right? If you didn't see it before, it's clear for sure now. All right, but let's go to chapter 4, verse 12. Anybody want to read that one? Or I'll read it if I can find it. All right, chapter 4, verse 12 says, a garden locked is my sister, my bride. A garden locked, a fountain sealed. Okay, now what? She's already compared herself with a garden and Getty, all that stuff, right? That even I left off a lot of things, but he's going to climb her tree and eat her fruits. Sounds like a great 60s song if you guys remember that one, right? Peaches or tree, all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So what? Like now the garden's locked. Maybe they got married in chapter 3 and now it's chapter 4 and it's like, I'm not doing this anymore. It was great before we were married. Now, yeah, it's all locked. Is that what's happening here?
Well, no, because he says my bride.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I guess, once you get married, they say sex is over once you get married, right? Here it is.
Oh, I thought that he was locked up in the garden with her.
Maybe.
But a sealed fountain don't sound like a good omen for him.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah, it seemed, even if you go a little further to 16, I'm trying to awaken anything. I hope all of your spouses are nearby. It's 9:09. But awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind. Blow upon my garden, that its fragrance may be wafted abroad. Let my beloved come to his garden, that he may eat its choicest fruits. So it was locked in verse 12, and now it's like, you can read. You're all adults. This is pretty erotic literature. The last text is 16, 4, 6. Oh, I already just read that. 16, 5 through 1. Oh, yeah, 5, 1. I come to the garden, my sister, my bride. I gather my myrrh with my spice. I eat my honeycomb with my honey. I drink my wine with my milk. Eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love. All right.
Maybe it was locked because she was on her period.
Maybe so, right? Because we know according to Leviticus 18, you can't do it then, right? Yep. Maybe that's what's happening. Well, we can throw anything in here. Now remember, we've got what we probably have are a bunch of ancient Near Eastern love poems that were put together into some sort of an order that the author was having fun with. Okay. I think that's probably that chiasm going on here. Okay. I think probably Tremper Longman's right that marriage is right here. I also think we're trying too hard to make this fit into our nice, neat little box. They probably just wouldn't have had these boxes, especially since these are just a bunch of poems that are combined together. But if we want to stick with our true love waits, our I kiss dating goodbye, and we have marriage right here, it doesn't matter if there's all kinds of sexual things going on here or here or here, because it's not an order. You're not reading this like, okay, we met, then we had sex, then we went a little further, we had sex, then we got married. Like it's not trying to give you a chronology. Okay, it's a sex poem, it's a love poem, or a bunch of them. And so it's going to include sexual activity throughout and marriage in there. Maybe they're, you just can't be too strict on a poetic book and force it into some kind of structure like it's trying to give you a prescription for the way that you're supposed to be in the future. So that locked garden does seem to imply some sort of chastity. At least most scholars would say that. Tremper Longman says that in the New International Commentary on the Old Testament. The fact that there is a repeated designation of her as a bride strongly indicates some sort of marital context. I think I said Longman sees chapter 3, but I was using this as my structure. But obviously there's more than 5 chapters. I think it's actually chapter 4 is where he sees marriage take place.
I'm struggling with them being married. I mean, I'm not taking them to my mama's house, especially not in their bed.
Yeah, that's the one thing you don't want to do is like if you're gonna do it anywhere else except for that place. Yes, but different worlds, different context here.
Their parents might have been dead,
Yeah, right. That's possible, I guess. All right. So the song seems to be celebrating sexual love. Maybe because of the bride thing, because of the marriage in chapter 4, if it's there, the stuff we were just reading about blowing upon the garden and eating choicest fruits. Maybe that's where marriage takes place. Maybe there's this movement towards that in some way. But I will say what we do know is that rabbinic interpretation has always interpreted this not merely as ancient Near Eastern love poems, but as a marital love, and especially as a God love for Israel book. Okay, so otherwise it would be very weird that it's here, so they say. So they've had to allegorize this in some way to say this is the picture of God and Israel specifically. Now, other scholars are going to disagree. They're going to say, look, the lovers appear to move freely in the fields and the countryside. There's not a lot of wedding ceremony description going on here. The erotic language is happening long before the marriage is happening. So, like, if you read Cheryl Exum, she says that the song is a celebration of erotic desire that resists patriarchal control structures. That's what's going on. This is a young couple doing what they want, not listening to the traditions of their parents. Okay, so it's, I don't know, every Disney movie, right? Nope, the parents are wrong. Now here's the new and the better, right? That's what's going on there. So
this also flies in the face of him throwing her over his shoulder and taking her as his bride.
That's true. There is
him down.
That's right. She does search for him. That's right. Michael Fox is somebody else that you would want to read. He's arguing that this has to do with the ancient Near Eastern courtship psalms, more than like a marriage ceremony so much. So it just fits into that structure. Anyway, okay. So is the song, what we've got to ask ourselves, is the song prescriptive, ethical instruction? Is it telling us, is it prescribing how we're supposed to be or do, or is it celebratory wisdom poetry about love? If it's the first, then we need to figure out all of these things, like, okay, sex before marriage, blah, 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 what's going on here? If it's the second, if it's just celebratory wisdom poetry about love, then it's not prescribing anything in particular. We shouldn't use this text to teach us these things. if it is celebrating covenant love, then there is some sort of ethical force, even if it's indirect, right? Like this happens within a covenant. This somehow there's a connection here, whether that covenant happens in a formal marriage ceremony or it's just sacred love. There's some indirect thing here. So those who are more in fan of the traditional are going to say, hey, the bride, that word halal shows up all over the place in that locked garden, talks about the exclusive access that only comes at a certain time. And those are decisions that scholars are arguing about all of this still. And it's 9:16.
I mean, I
So
don't mean to
everybody
get
feels
hung
a lot-
up on it, but I just really, I mean, she took him to her mama's bed. That just
You
doesn't
can't
scream
get over
marriage
that.
to me.
This marriage is not going to work, is it? It's going to be some serious problems. Yep.
Doesn't translate well to our culture.
No, it definitely does not. No, but also probably don't describe your wife's breasts the way he does in this book, or her hair, or her eyes, or her legs, which are like the pillars of Solomon's temple. Like nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah. I think Bible Project makes a good point when they talk about Hebrew poetry is not primarily visual. It makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So next week we are going to get into the actual New Testament. If you want to read Matthew chapter 5, that's a great place. This is the passage that talks about, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery, but I say to you. So we'll want to look and see what's going on there. Specifically verse 32, because it's going to mention the word porneia there. Matthew 15 is another passage you can look at that we're going to talk about. And 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and chapter 7. I think those are the only ones that I picked. Oh, Hebrews 13:4 is one more. Okay, there's a few others, but those are all be shorter. But 1 Corinthians 6 and 7 and Matthew chapter 5 are your big ones that we're going to talk about next week. And then that'll be it. So we might finish next week. I don't know. That depends on you. If we still have to have the conversation, right? Like, okay, we have all this information. We didn't come up with any of this perfect answers. What do we do now? Like, is the Bible designed to tell us the answer to this? Or do we just pick what we like based on just the way we want to act? All right. 9:19. I went 4 minutes over. Sorry, everybody. It's like 3 or 4 people already disappeared. They got tired early, which I understand.